is still a profoundly moving statement of our values. It has never been more relevant than it is now.
One careless sentence was enough to turn a private royal discussion into an extraordinary family rupture. Behind closed doors, Camilla made a remark that William regarded not merely as insulting, but as a deliberate attack on his judgment, his loyalty, and his place in the monarchy. Yet when the prince challenged her, Charles did something no one in the room expected. He ordered his own son to leave, and the door closed before William could answer. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles had summoned William and Camilla to a restricted meeting at Windsor to settle the future division of royal responsibilities. Those responsibilities included overseas representation, ceremonial authority, and the public duties assigned to the monarchy's most senior members. Only 2 trusted aides were present when the Prince of Wales entered carrying a briefing folder. He expected resistance. He did not expect betrayal. The discussion began with questions about public confidence and which figures should lead future engagements. William argued that credibility could not be protected through titles alone. The family needed consistency, clear boundaries, and people the public trusted. Camilla listened until his reference to Catherine's influence changed the tone. Then the Queen Consort said he was still allowing Catherine's popularity to make decisions for him. William froze. The comment challenged more than his wife's role. It suggested that his judgment as the future king had been weakened by Catherine's public appeal. He asked Camilla to withdraw it immediately. She did not. Charles ended the confrontation with 5 words. "William, leave the room now." The prince did not shout. He closed his folder and stared at his father for several long seconds. Then he asked whether the order was final. The king answered with a quiet nod. He offered no explanation, no reassurance, and no promise that the discussion would continue later. That silence turned authority into rejection. William pushed back his chair. Camilla remained seated and kept one hand resting upon the papers before her. She neither apologized nor looked toward him. Her stillness made the insult feel prepared rather than careless, as though she had entered the meeting knowing exactly how far she was willing to go. Then William noticed something beneath her hand. A second briefing paper carried his name above a proposal to reduce his access to certain private royal consultations, confidential discussions, in which the monarch tests decisions before they become official policy. He could not read every line, but he saw enough to understand that the remark might have concealed a larger plan. William leaves the room carrying neither an apology nor an explanation, but what he glimpsed on Camilla's desk ensures that humiliation will quickly become suspicion. The confrontation was shocking because it exposed more than disagreement. Charles was not simply managing a difficult meeting, William was not merely defending his wife, and Camilla was not speaking as a distant observer. Each entered that room, carrying years of loyalty, resentment, sacrifice, and fear. The argument lasted only minutes, but the emotional history behind it stretched across decades, and every person present understood that the king's command had reopened wounds the family had never truly healed. Charles had grown increasingly uneasy about the power of separate royal households. Each household operated with its own advisors, schedules, and priorities, and the king feared that this independence was weakening central control. William's influence was rising, Catherine's public standing remained strong, and their team was making more decisions without waiting for approval. To the monarch, that looked like drift. To his son, it looked like preparation for the future. William believed protecting Catherine and their children was inseparable from protecting the crown itself. The prince did not see his wife as a political influence hovering beside him. He saw her as the person who understood public trust, family pressure, and the cost of royal duty better than almost anyone. Camilla's suggestion therefore struck at his marriage and his fitness to reign. Charles remained alone with her after the door closed. He pressed his fingers against the edge of the table, still angry that William had challenged the remark so directly. Yet the king also knew what his command had sounded like. He had defended authority, but he had failed to reassure his son. Camilla broke the silence. She told Charles that William had never accepted her right to speak frankly about the monarchy's future. The queen consort insisted she had questioned influence and governance, not Catherine's character. Governance meant the way major royal decisions were controlled and carried out. But her defensive tone revealed something deeper. She experienced the prince's resistance as a personal rejection. William returned to Adelaide Cottage carrying the unopened folder. He placed it on a side table and removed his cufflinks with trembling hands. Catherine noticed immediately. When she asked what had happened, he answered, "He asked me to leave after she spoke about you." Catherine did not react with outrage. She asked whether Camilla's remark had been included in the official meeting notes. Her question changed the danger. If the insult had been recorded, it could become part of a formal argument against William's judgment. Hours passed without a message from Charles. Instead, a notice arrived from the private secretary, the king's senior administrative advisor, stating that William's place at the next strategic meeting was under review. What first appeared to be a father's impulsive command now begins to resemble a coordinated restriction, and the reason for it lies in a confrontation the palace has tried to bury. The Windsor meeting did not create the fracture. It exposed one that had been widening in silence. Weeks earlier, during a private supper following a diplomatic banquet, Camilla and William had exchanged words that altered the atmosphere between them permanently. Only 3 people heard the conversation, yet every decision that followed carried its shadow. It was the moment when professional disagreement became personal, and when Charles quietly began preparing for the possibility that his wife and heir could no longer share the same private council. William's household had been developing a simpler plan for future overseas engagements, with Catherine taking a central role in several major visits. Her growing responsibilities mattered because international appearances shape public confidence, and the prince believed she could bring stability to a monarchy facing constant scrutiny. Camilla's advisors saw something more threatening. They believed the proposal bypassed the king and quietly changed seniority before Charles had approved it. Charles tried to hold the balance. He asked both households to submit revised plans, hoping administration could calm what emotion had already poisoned. Yet in a documented conversation with his private secretary, the senior official who manages the monarch's confidential work, he admitted that neither side trusted the other's motives. Camilla confronted William after a state banquet at Buckingham Palace. A state banquet is a formal dinner held for visiting national leaders, but the smaller supper that followed carried none of its ceremony. She told him Catherine's expanding role was creating a second court before the first has finished its work. The prince answered that public confidence could not be rationed simply to protect anyone's position. Camilla set down her glass. She asked whether he intended to build his future by making his father's reign appear temporary. The question stunned William because it turned ordinary preparation for succession into an accusation of disloyalty. He warned her never to describe Catherine's service as ambition against Charles, then left before dessert. The queen consort remained seated, pale with anger and unwilling to call him back. Camilla later gave Charles a selective account. She said William had accused their household of obstructing the monarchy's future, but she did not mention that she had first described Catherine's prominence as a rival court. The king heard resistance without hearing the provocation that caused it. Charles dictated a confidential memorandum the following morning. A memorandum is a private written instruction used to guide official decisions. He requested a review of attendance at sensitive strategy meetings, paused before naming William, then ordered that the prince be listed among those whose access could be restricted during personal conflicts. By the time Windsor erupted, Camilla knew that restriction already existed as an option. Her remark did not create the weapon. It placed the spark beside it. The banquet exchange explains why Charles was prepared to act, but it does not explain why Camilla pressed the conflict at the exact moment William was most vulnerable. When William returned to Windsor the following morning, he did not come seeking revenge. He came seeking a retraction. Charles had agreed to 10 private minutes, but Camilla entered before father and son could speak freely. What followed was no longer a policy disagreement, wrapped in royal language. It was a direct confrontation in which every carefully protected resentment surfaced at once, and one forceful gesture from the king made clear whose dignity he was prepared to defend. William had requested a private audience, with no advisors, no written agenda, and no officials waiting to record every sentence. A private audience is a confidential meeting granted by the monarch, usually to discuss matters too sensitive for a wider room. His message warned that the dispute had to be settled as a family matter before it damaged the working relationship between the king and his heir. Charles agreed. Then he changed the conditions. Camilla entered only minutes after William arrived and took the chair beside her husband. The prince understood immediately that there would be no private exchange. Charles had decided that every accusation against the queen consort would be made in her presence. William remained standing. He repeated her remark word for word, then said, "You brought my wife into a discussion where she was not present to defend herself. Take it back." Camilla refused. She called the statement an observation, not an insult. Then she argued that Catherine's popularity had become a shield behind which William advanced decisions while rejecting criticism. The queen consort insisted that public approval could not place one household beyond challenge. William pushed his chair aside. He told her that Catherine would not be used to weaken his voice or question his fitness to serve. His anger stayed controlled, but every word carried the force of a boundary finally spoken aloud. Charles struck the table once with the flat of his hand. The sound ended the argument instantly. The king told his son that no one would dictate how Camilla spoke in his presence. William then named the hidden paper. He revealed that he had seen the proposal to restrict his attendance at private consultations. Charles looked startled. Camilla turned at once toward the folder resting nearby, exposing how closely she had been following the plan. The prince told his father that excluding him would not erase the conflict. He would continue performing his duties, but he would no longer join discussions where attacks upon Catherine were treated as strategic advice. Charles warned that rejecting royal consultation would carry consequences. William met his gaze and answered, "Then make them yours, not hers." The confrontation ends with no apology and no reconciliation, leaving Charles to decide whether he is protecting his marriage or surrendering the authority of the crown to a private grievance. Royal power rarely announces itself with shouting. More often, it appears as a signature beneath carefully chosen words. Hours after the confrontation, Charles is presented with a memorandum that would temporarily exclude William from a series of private strategy meetings. The document looks administrative, almost harmless. Yet the moment the king lifts his pen, he understands that he is not merely controlling a schedule. He is defining whether his heir remains a partner or becomes a problem to be managed. Charles possessed the practical authority to make that choice. Informal strategy meetings were confidential discussions used to coordinate royal households, foreign visits, and future ceremonies. And attendance depended upon the sovereign's approval rather than William's position as heir. The king could therefore narrow his son's involvement without changing any constitutional title. On paper, nothing permanent would happen. In reality, trust would be altered. Camilla did not need to command the process directly. Her constant access allowed her to influence how every disagreement reached Charles, which concern appeared urgent, and who seemed stable or disruptive. Proximity had become its own kind of power. Charles read the memorandum twice in his study. He placed his fountain pen beside it, stepped away, and asked his private secretary, the senior official responsible for managing the monarch's confidential work, whether William had cancelled any public duties since their confrontation. The answer was no. The prince had attended every engagement, answered every briefing, and made no public attempt to embarrass his father. That answer weakened the argument for punishment. William was behaving with discipline, while Charles was preparing to exclude him for a private dispute. The king understood the contradiction, and for several moments he said nothing. Camilla entered after being summoned. She warned that reversing course would teach William that confrontation produced reward. Charles asked whether she regretted bringing Catherine into the argument. The queen consort paused, then answered that she regretted only that the prince had chosen to misunderstand. The sentence settled the matter. Charles returned to the desk and read the final version. It did not remove William from one meeting. It suspended him from 3 private consultations, involving household coordination, foreign tours, and long-term ceremonial planning. The king lowered his pen and signed. His hand remained on the page after the ink dried, as though part of him already understood the emotional cost. William received the decision through a sealed envelope, not a telephone call. Catherine watched him read each exclusion. He did not curse, protest, or tear the paper. He simply folded it and became unnervingly calm. Charles's signature gives the conflict official weight, but William's silence after reading it proves far more unsettling than anger would have been. The first meeting without William begins on time, but nothing about it feels normal. His chair remains against the wall, his briefing papers are missing, and every person present understands why. Charles expects the absence to restore order. Instead, the room becomes consumed by it. Beyond Windsor, the prince receives the new reality without protest. Yet one controlled decision of his own reveals that he will not beg for readmission, and that the punishment may cost the king more than anticipated. Charles opens the restricted consultation with Camilla, senior courtiers, and household officials gathered around the main table. A restricted consultation is a private planning meeting used to coordinate future duties, tours, and ceremonial responsibilities. William's place has not been left empty. His chair has been removed entirely, a deliberate sign that his exclusion is active rather than accidental. The agenda quickly begins to fail. Several items involve William and Catherine directly, including an overseas visit, a national service, and a major youth initiative. Officials hesitate each time approval is required, because no one can commit the Wales household without its representative present. Charles asks them to continue, but one decision after another is postponed. William receives the formal notice at Kensington Palace and reads it once. He hands the letter to Catherine without tearing it, challenging it, or asking for mercy. Then the future king removes all 3 Windsor consultations from his diary and instructs his staff to continue with their independent schedule. Catherine feels the weight immediately. She worries that her public role has become the weapon used against her husband. He tells her Camilla chose the remark, and Charles chose the punishment. Catherine will not carry responsibility for either decision. Charles encounters the cost inside the meeting itself. When an official asks who will approve a proposed tour involving William, the king looks toward the chair against the wall and hesitates. He finally says the matter must wait. The private secretary approaches him during the break and warns that excluding the heir from planning while expecting him to carry out those plans is unsustainable. Charles reacts sharply, asking whether the staff now considers William indispensable. The silence that follows gives him an answer he does not want. William then makes one decision of his own. He keeps every formal duty but declines a private family reception scheduled after the next consultation. He will not appear socially welcomed after being professionally excluded. Without him present, Camilla inherits greater influence and greater exposure. Every delayed decision now points toward her role, and every failure risks becoming hers to defend. The punishment was designed to reduce William's influence, yet his disciplined absence begins exposing how much the royal system depends on the very man Charles has pushed away. The turning point does not arrive in a council chamber. It comes late in the evening, after the advisors have gone and the formal papers have been locked away. Charles asks William to meet him in a small private sitting room, with no aides, no Camilla, and no record of what will be said. For the first time since the Remark, they face one another not as sovereign and heir, but as father and son, and neither can hide behind procedure. Charles had reached the limit of silence. 2 consultations had stalled. Senior staff had warned that the arrangement could not continue, and every delayed decision now exposed the damage created by William's absence. The king sent a handwritten message rather than another formal notice. He asked for a private conversation and made one promise clear: no one else would attend. William accepted, but not without a condition. The prince informed his father that restoring access could not be discussed until Camilla's comment about Catherine was addressed directly. A private consultation meant a confidential meeting outside official records, but this time, secrecy would not be used to bury the wound. Charles poured water for them both and left his own glass untouched. William remained standing until the monarch quietly asked him to sit. That small hesitation revealed how far apart they had become. The king spoke first. He admitted that ordering his son from the room had not been necessary for the meeting to continue. He had felt trapped between allowing Camilla to face a direct challenge and defending his wife before William. In that moment, he chose authority, because authority felt easier than doubt. William answered without anger. He said he had never asked Charles to reject Camilla or deny her a voice. He had asked his father to understand that defending one person should not require humiliating another, especially when Catherine had been criticized in her absence and given no chance to answer. Charles then revealed that he had questioned Camilla privately after the confrontation. The queen consort had refused to apologize. She maintained that her concern was valid, even if the wording had been harsh. Yet the king no longer used her refusal as a shield. Whatever she said, "I chose what happened next," he admitted. The words changed the room. Charles accepted that the removal order, the memorandum, and the 3 exclusions had carried his signature. William said he required no public apology, but private access could not resume while personal attacks were allowed to shape official judgment. Charles looked at his untouched glass and promised an answer before morning. For the first time, the conflict is no longer framed as William against Camilla. It becomes a test of whether Charles can correct a choice he now openly accepts as his own. By sunrise, the private rupture has escaped the palace walls. The public does not know every word spoken at Windsor, but it knows enough. The king removed his heir from a meeting after a remark involving Catherine, then restricted his access to future consultations. What had been managed as a family dispute is suddenly interpreted as a struggle over influence, marriage, and succession, and one newspaper front page turns an uncomfortable palace secret into an image the monarchy cannot ignore. Palace correspondents learn that William has missed several private consultations after a heated disagreement. Officials describe the absences as routine scheduling, but the explanation collapses because the prince continues attending every public duty. He appears at engagements, completes briefings, and carries out his responsibilities without complaint. The contrast matters. A man supposedly too disruptive for private planning remains dependable before the nation. Buckingham Palace refuses to discuss confidential conversations, while Kensington Palace offers no counterstatement. The silence prevents an open war between households, yet it creates a space that public suspicion quickly fills. Then a national newspaper publishes 2 closed palace doors beneath the headline, "Air Shut Out." Its subheading reads, "King removes William after row over Catherine." Copies rise above the barriers outside Buckingham Palace as broadcasters report live. Charles unfolds the newspaper at breakfast and stares at the image. The king folds the page inward before Camilla enters, but she notices the headline immediately and asks whether officials intend to challenge it. He tells her they cannot deny decisions he actually made. Camilla feels the accusation closing around her. The Queen Consort argues that the coverage presents her as the architect of a campaign against William. Charles does not reassure her. He says the palace can correct false details, but it cannot pretend the restrictions never existed. For the first time, she hears him separate her remark from his responsibility. An evening panel deepens the pressure. A veteran royal commentator describes the crisis as a dispute in which the insult may have been private, but the punishment became institutional. The phrase spreads across radio, television, and online discussion because it captures the central wound. One family argument had been given official force. William passes the palace later that afternoon. Crowds gathered nearby applaud as his motorcade moves through. The prince offers no broad wave and makes no public reference to the dispute, but his restraint strengthens the response. Silence has made him appear disciplined, not defeated. That evening, Charles orders the exclusion memorandum returned to his desk. Beside it, he requests a second document restoring William's attendance. The monarchy's private conflict has become a public judgment, forcing Charles to decide whether royal authority is proven by refusing to retreat or by correcting a decision that has damaged everyone involved. The final decision arrives without ceremony. There is no grand family summit, no triumphant announcement, and no attempt to pretend the damage never occurred. Charles summons William and Camilla to the same Windsor room where the rupture began. The chairs are returned to their original places. The disputed memorandum rests in front of the king. This time, however, he does not ask his son to leave. He looks at both of them and delivers a verdict that permanently changes the rules between them. Charles chose that room deliberately. The king wanted the correction to happen where the humiliation had begun, not inside another protected conversation that could later be denied or softened. William entered without papers, while Camilla arrived already aware that the restrictions had been reconsidered. The memorandum before them was the written order that had suspended the prince from 3 confidential planning meetings. Charles spoke with controlled finality. He said spouses had every right to defend one another in private, but personal criticism could never determine whether the heir participated in essential royal decisions. Family loyalty, he warned, had crossed into governance, and that boundary had endangered both trust and authority. The king lifted the exclusion order, drew a line through his signature, and wrote "Withdrawn" across the first page. William would return immediately to the consultations concerning household coordination, foreign tours, and ceremonial planning. The reversal was complete. Charles then faced his son. He did not apologize for loving Camilla or supporting her right to speak. He apologized for using royal power in the heat of a family dispute, and for making William's dignity the price of ending an argument. The admission carried no excuse. Camilla addressed Catherine's name directly. The Queen Consort did not withdraw every concern about the Wales household, but she conceded that making the princess personally responsible for William's decisions had been disrespectful and unnecessary. Future disagreements, she agreed, would challenge policies, not motives, marriages, or private loyalties. William accepted the correction without triumph. The prince confirmed that he would resume his responsibilities and made no attempt to humiliate Camilla in return. He had not sought victory over her. He had demanded a boundary around Catherine and fairness inside the crown. Charles established a permanent rule before the meeting ended. Future disputes between royal households would pass through formal briefing channels, meaning written procedures designed to separate personal emotion from official judgment. No senior family member could again be excluded from duty because of an unresolved private exchange. The same door that once marked William's humiliation now closes on a settled conflict, leaving the monarchy bruised, corrected, and finally clear about where personal loyalty must end and royal responsibility must begin. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.